from CLGF, and this new CSCN member-led webinar series is actually an initiative of the Commonwealth Sustainable Cities Network, a platform that brings together local government leaders as well as stakeholders from across the Commonwealth to champion sustainable urban development. The CSCN supports collaboration and innovation on critical city challenges with a very strong focus on inclusivity, resilience, and local leadership. The series reflects our commitment to showcasing innovative local initiatives from cities across the Commonwealth, promoting peer-to-peer learning and shared experience among our city leaders, and of course, amplifying the voices of underrepresented regions, such as the small island development states, in forums such as the Global Development Finance discussions. Each of the 60-minute sessions that will be held as part of the member-led webinars contributes to the CSCN's strategic priorities to support city empowerment, including things like inclusive urban finance, resilient city development, and collective action in line with the global frameworks like the SDGs, and in this case, the financing for development process. Today's session in particular focuses on a timely and a very crucial issue, unlocking local finance through municipal securities. We'll explore how Belize City, a small Caribbean capital, successfully has navigated the creation of its municipal securities framework. We'll also gain comparative insights from South Africa through the experience of the South African Local Government Association. It's now my pleasure, of course, to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Lude Miller, the Deputy Mayor of Belize City and the Executive Secretary of the Belize Mayors Association. With a background in public sector management, finance, and business, he has spent the past 6 years serving in various leadership and advisory roles within Belize's local government sector. He brings a very strong commitment to innovative governance, youth engagement, and advancing sustainable development at the municipal level. He will offer some opening reflections on why this topic in particular is critical to Belize City and outline the local challenges that led to the adoption of municipal securities as a financing approach. Eliud, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Janine. Good morning to all participants, distinguished panelists, colleagues, and fellow municipal leaders. It's a pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Belize City Council to this very timely and forward-thinking discussion on unlocking local government finance. I extend warm Belizean greetings on behalf of Mayor Bernard Wagner and our entire City Council team, and sincere thanks to the CSCN through CLGF for facilitating this very crucial and timely conversation. While Belize City is not the capital of Belize anymore, we remain the financial and commercial hub of the country, home to the majority of business activity and population density, making our city's development trajectory especially important to national growth. For Belize City, the pursuit of financial innovation has not been optional, it has been essential. Like many Caribbean municipalities, we have faced growing demands for infrastructure, service delivery, and climate resilience, all while managing limited fiscal space and external shocks. These realities are what led us to chart a new course, one that you will hear more about shortly from Mr. Irvin Paris, Managing Director of Legacy Fund Limited, who serves as the Council's financial advisor. Mr. Paris and his team have worked closely with us over the past couple of years to craft and operationalize a municipal financing framework that is not only fit for purpose, but fit for Belize City's future. What makes this journey even more meaningful is that our investors are not just supporting an instrument, they are directly investing in the development and future of Belize City itself. Their participation reflects a growing trust in municipal level leadership and a shared commitment to sustainable urban progress. Central to this shift has been the transition from the earlier Municipal Paper Act to the now enacted Municipal Service Regulations of 2023. These updated regulations have expanded the tools available to municipalities like ours, introducing municipal notes and bonds, improving investor protection, and mandating public transparency through regular reporting and a requirement for audited financials. These reforms have allowed us to access new sources of capital while maintaining fiscal discipline, unlocking financing, that has already rehabilitated over 150 streets across Belize City in 2023 and 2024 alone. Key transformations took place in areas like the Holy Emmanuel area, where we eliminated makeshift London bridges and replaced them with safe, durable streets, building more livable communities and traversable streets that residents never had before. Belize City has led the charge nationally in the use of municipal securities, and we are now proud to see other municipalities like the San Pedro Tongue tapping into this model as a viable option to fund their local development priorities. Let me be clear, this is not just about raising funds, it's about strengthening local autonomy, demonstrating credibility, and creating real partnerships between government, community, and the private sector. Today, Belize City remains the leading municipality in our country, full of promise and continuing to lead the charge in smart city initiatives as well as electric mobility. Our 21st century smart city projects aim to modernize urban living through advanced technology and forward-thinking solutions. We are expanding and enhancing our traffic control light systems and improving both on and off-street parking, including the recent addition of our new smart city parking facility. We've introduced the first set of electric buses to the country of Belize, and just last week, we launched our first electric taxis pilot project. This speaks volumes about who we are, a city unafraid to lead, to innovate, and to shape the future ahead of us. As we continue to grow and strengthen our municipal governance, and with the support of our advisors like Legacy Fund Limited, we hope to continue capitalizing on these financial facilities to build a Belize City that is safe, resilient, and full of opportunity for all, which is, after all, the vision of Belize City. Today's session provides a valuable opportunity for us to reflect on these lessons and share experiences with our Commonwealth colleagues. We look forward to Mr. Perez's detailed presentation shortly and to hearing from you all throughout today's session. Thank you and welcome once again.
Thank you so much for your remarks, Deputy Mayor. And now you know a little bit more about Belize and their journey. So now we'll turn to some more detail. Now we turn to Mr. Irvin Perez, the Managing Director of Legacy Fund Limited and a Senior Financial Advisor to the Belize City Council. Mr. Perez is also the founder of Gracie Rock LLC, a registered National Futures Association member in the United States of America. Mr. Perez has pioneered the development of the Belize capital market with the successful structuring and public issuance of over 170 million in domestic securities. These have included the first municipal and education bonds in the Caribbean, the 2012 Belize City Council municipal bonds, and the 2014 SCA Mercy bonds. Mr. Perez has provided financial advisory services to public and private corporations, local financial institutions, and commercial banks, municipalities, trusts, and educational institutions. Mr. Perez has obtained a master's degree in economics from Carleton University in Canada and earned his bachelor's degree in mathematics from Regis University in Denver, Colorado, USA. Today, he will guide us through the structuring of Belize's municipal securities journey, including the macroeconomic and the legislative context, some key enablers and lessons learned, and the impacts and opportunities for councils. Irvin, the floor is yours.
Good day, and thank you so much, Janine, and thank you, Deputy Mayor, for leading the introduction. It is my pleasure to be here and to participate in this forum and to tell the story of Belize City's journey using innovative financial solutions to support their innovation. So this really and truly is about a journey that Belize City took, and this story has a number of chapters. It's very small chapters. One is to understand the macroeconomic background surrounding the national country in which Belize City was a part of, and also the opportunities that were also on a national basis in the financial market, as well as the initial efforts, the current market situation that was available for Belize City to use this method of financing. And also to note that on this journey, there are still structural challenges. Deputy Mayor alluded a little bit on those. And even with the new laws and regulations that are in place, there are still improvements needed to even further capitalize on what's possible. And we'll talk a little bit about those opportunities. And then finally, of course, there's a Q&A. So if we talk about the story of Belize, like so many other Commonwealth countries, Belize in 2012, which is around the time when we started this journey, had a high level of national debt. In fact, and not going into a lot of detail, the country had defaulted on its international bonds prior to reaching this scenario. So therefore, the national government had tremendous fiscal constraints on its ability to finance public investments, not only nationally, but to support the required public infrastructural investments needed in the city. As Deputy Mayor mentioned, Belize City is the biggest commercial city in Belize and the heart of the country. And the basic infrastructure of that city was hugely in deficit because of the lack of financing, both nationally as well. It's a bit of some context to the story. Belize is a country of about estimated 406,000 individuals, 430,000 people, with an overall gross domestic product of just about 3.2 billion US dollars. Economic growth over the last year was 8.4%. So that gives you a context of the size of the economy. As Janine had mentioned, these small economies. When we look at the initial opportunities, we saw that, like a lot of Commonwealth countries, Belize had a bank dominated financial system, and in that banking system, there was tremendous excess liquidity. So, as you know, banks have reserve requirements. They have to keep a certain amount of short-term assets based on deposits. These were way above what was needed. The interest rates in the environment for savings were low, and the borrowing cost was high. So a local authority like Belize City to finance some of these developments through the traditional commercial loan would have been most prohibitive, costly and prohibitive, and the terms of those arrangements would also have not been enticing. In looking at that challenge, there was another opportunity which we saw, and this may be different for other local authorities in other Commonwealth countries. Initially, the central government had embarked on some reforms providing more autonomy to local authorities. The critical part of that reform was that a broad base of local revenues, which used to be centralized, or used to be captured by central government, was turned over to local authorities. And this included property tax, trade license fees, traffic fees. So all those revenues were now controlled by the local authorities, and it gave the local authorities a bit of autonomy. And because of that autonomy, we saw there was an opportunity to use that autonomy to service a longer term type of instrument, municipal securities, which is not new in the world, but would have been new to Belize. And both the the large excess liquidity in the market and the low levels of returns for savers, the city council's autonomy with its revenue, we saw a perfect match in which the city could use its innovation by creating these instruments in which investors would have opportunity to make better money. The city would have a lower cost of funding public infrastructure. And that led to the first municipal bond offer in 2012, which was just $20 million. But it was a development in the capital market. And it also showed a way how the the market could support local infrastructure. From 2012 to current, we had wanted to see a much more significant development with municipal financing, as Deputy Mayor alluded to. There is still tremendous opportunities for local authorities in Belize and for Belize City in particular. The city is leading the country in innovation in terms of climate resilience, electrification of its public transportation system, and there's great room for financing that. And we'll speak a little bit about the challenges why the market hasn't developed to that extent. So the market size remains small. It's used about $150 million, including all other issuers, with the longest term municipal security being 20 years. Cities, we believe, like Belize City, could have longer term investments, not only for institutional investors, but for mom and pop, for the small household. The highest coupon rate is about 8%, which we think is quite favorable for pension fund returns. The holdings of these municipal securities remain very concentrated with institutional investors. And again, as the deputy mayor said, municipal securities offer a unique opportunity for average households to invest in their local cities, invest back in Belize City. And so we would want to see, as the Belize City, that there is a much more widespread holding of municipal papers and municipal securities by households. So what are some of these structural challenges that we considered? And from a governance level, the terms of local authorities in Belize tend to be very short, 3 years. And so it limits this long-term planning that needs to support the type of municipal financing that could go on. The second thing is that short-term nature also creates a high level of turnover in key financial and technical positions in cities, including Belize City, such as the city administrator, town administrator, the financial director, revenue managers, and this erodes the institutional memory and capacities. So those are just some governance structures which I know that the Mayors Association has been trying to address with central government, with reforms to more governance legislation for cities. But there's also some additional structural challenges which we would discuss, we would love to discuss here. Local governments are highly dependent on central government for approval of major policy and financial decisions. So while legislation has been created that gave the local authorities like Belize City a lot of autonomy over their revenues, major policy decisions such as implementing a particular fee or so to cover an investment in, say, garbage collection may have to go all the way to central government to be approved, even though the local authority has the responsibility of providing the garbage service. And financial decisions as well, such as even issuing the municipal security or borrowing, has to go to central government as opposed to the local authority, which is democratically elected. All the councils are and have to go back to the community every 3 years to be for their policies to be approved or disapproved in votes, still have to take those decisions to the central government, and that creates have generated the inability of local authorities sometimes to take initiative on large projects and to reform in a way that could help them go faster. Despite all this, in the early stages of the municipal journey for Belize, the municipal legislation was quite specific. So the Belize City Council Municipal Bond Act was the sole act passed in 2012 and only allowed Belize City to issue municipal security. The success that Belize City has shown over the period of time with managing its municipal security though has allowed general legislation to be passed, Municipal Securities Act in 2023, which allowed all municipalities which meet a certain criteria to be able to issue securities in the market. So that is an improvement. However, there are still necessary improvements. The existing regulations as is, we think could require more improvements on municipal financing. For example, giving municipalities the ability to issue securities without central government, because the Municipal Securities Act is regulated by a financial service commission. So it's kind of like the Securities Exchange Commission. And so there is oversight and there is investors oversight. And so we believe that that should be sufficient. There's also capacity building needs in the local authorities, institutional capacity building needs, a greater need for community engagement, a long-term planning, which would provide visionary municipal development, build public trust, and also help to provide investors with long-term buy-in on investments. We know that there are some wonderful projects that Belize City is embarking on. I think there is a boardwalk project. There is the transition to clean energy in transportation. A lot of these projects could be funded better by municipal securities if those changes and community engagement is there. And then we speak about general legislative changes, giving the local authority more autonomy over fiscal decision and policy decision. So that's the short journey of Belize City in terms of being highly innovative. And we do want to commend the city and the leadership at the city of being innovative. So the innovation is what drives the financial innovation. The mayors having the willingness and the leadership, the councillors having the willingness to do something different based on the opportunities that are presented to them. We'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Irvin. That was a very insightful initial presentation. And I know for some people, it may be you're starting in a place where you're wondering what are municipal securities, or you may be in a different place where you've already started exploring using municipal securities in your own cities. What we've done today is we have decided to also invite a representative from the South African context to give some of his feedback on how this resonates across there. And just a reminder to all of you as our participants, please, during the presentations, feel free to leave your questions or any comments in the chat, and we will come back to them after where we are going through the Q&A segment. Okay, so to help us understand how Belize's experience really resonates in a global way, we now welcome Mr. James Matsey, a municipal infrastructure finance specialist at the South African Local Government Association. James brings nearly 20 years of hands-on experience in the world of municipal infrastructure finance, where he has tackled the intricacies of finance, policy, and project management. In his current role as the Municipal Infrastructure Finance Specialist at the South African Local Government Association, James has spearheaded initiatives designed to boost service delivery and to strengthen infrastructure financing across municipalities. He's known for his advocacy and his lobbying skills, and he's very adept at shaping policy decisions in the complex area of intergovernmental fiscal relations. Academically, James holds a master's in public policy from the Wits School of Governance and is currently pursuing a master's in energy leadership at Wits Business School, further expanding his impact in the field. Today, he will reflect on the South African perspective, and he will also help us to identify the broader takeaways for city financing. Thank you, and over to you, James.
Thank you so much, Janine, for those warm introductory remarks. The Deputy Mayor, Irvin, and all the participants in this webinar. Really good day, everyone. I don't know which time of the day it is for you, but it's really an honor today to respond to Ivan's very insightful presentation and to share, of course, South Africa's journey in developing our municipal bond market. I would say what underpins our story as a country is one of evolution of regulation, intergovernmental coordination, and ultimately leveraging capital markets for infrastructure investments. To go into a broader context of South African bond markets, South Africa is one of the few countries in Africa with an active bond market. Though still relatively shallow, it has seen innovation and growth, especially among our metropolitan cities, the city of Johannesburg, the city of Cape Town, the city of Ekurhuleni and eThekwini are leading the bond issuance efforts. Of course, we have 257 municipalities in the country and only 4 have issued bonds. This would essentially mean that there are challenges with scale, capacity, and market depth. Further going into context in terms of our bond market, Johannesburg was the first South African city to issue a municipal bond in 2004. The latest bond issuance was by the city of eThekwini in 2022. The municipal bond market in South Africa makes up less than 1% of the total securities market. Conventional loans have surpassed bonds in financing municipal infrastructure. Initially, around 2004, municipal bonds used to dominate the municipal borrowing environment, but now loans account for 70% of the total municipal borrowing. Also to note that our municipal bonds are listed in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. In terms of an enabling environment, I really believe that South Africa's progress stems from a strong legal foundation. Our constitution allows municipalities to borrow responsibly. We also have the Municipal Finance Management Act, which provides detailed borrowing guidelines, mandating long-term debt to be used only for capital investments. We also have the policy framework for municipal borrowing, which emphasizes the golden rule. So the golden rule is basically that no national government will guarantee municipal debt obligations. The policy framework also guides in terms of market-based discipline as a borrowing regulation. Recent amendments in the regulations have been around the Pension Fund Act to allow the pension funds to invest in public infrastructure. This now allows for institutional investors to participate in the market and to see really the Belize approach to legislation and regulation. Before in 2012, they were very specific with only one city being able to markets. Now that they have brought in it, I think really the country is in the right direction. In terms of some of the cross-regional comparisons with Belize, we also have a high national government debt as a country. Economic growth over the past 10 years has not matched our populations, so that's been a challenge as well. Historic basic infrastructure backlogs and strategic infrastructure deficits persist. But of course, I think where we differ a bit with Belize is in terms of our local government structure. I would say that our local government structure as a country is more absolute as far as fiscal federalism is concerned. South African municipalities have constitutional assignments of powers and functions, as well as revenue assignments as well. To add that some critical trading services like water and electricity are also municipal responsibilities. Municipal councils, very, very key, have executive authority over municipal borrowing choices. National government does not interfere when a municipality has a decision in terms of borrowing. Of course, there has to be cooperative processes. There has to be consultations of communities. Municipalities must also consult National Treasury as well. We also have many challenges in the country, unfortunately, as far as our sector is concerned. Our governance constraints are mainly around rampant corruption and also poor fiscal discipline. And then in terms of the opportunities and recommendations, I would say that it becomes quite key that we build local creditworthiness as a sector, whether it's in South Africa, whether it's in Belize, whether it's anywhere across the Commonwealth. South Africa's best performing cities have robust revenue management, clean governance, and also an ability to exploit their regional endowments. We also see that long-term planning through infrastructure investment plans that are aligned to budgets is critical, though, of course, like Belize, municipal capabilities around developing bankable projects is still a challenge. Considering pool financing mechanisms can allow, I guess, smaller municipalities in Belize to share transaction costs and access markets. In my research, I saw that there are a couple of small municipalities there as well. So pool financing mechanisms would be quite ideal. The secondary market liquidity remains limited for both countries. I think now that you have a General Securities Act and more municipalities will be able to explore the issuing of bonds, we will see if this will be able to catalyze the secondary market. South Africa is yet to succeed with its secondary market, so we might learn a thing or two over the years with Belize's market maturing. Finally, I think the opportunity to harness green bonds is quite important. South Africa has successfully issued 2 green municipal bonds. City of Johannesburg issued their first green municipal bond in 2015, and the City of Cape Town in 2017. This is a strategy that Belize could adopt for climate-resilient infrastructure. As I conclude, while the contexts differ, I think both countries face similar challenges, both trying to manage fiscal decentralization, both ultimately have to build credit-worthy municipalities, and also are striving to deepen their domestic capital markets as well. Indeed, I believe that Belize City is on a promising path and continuing its legal reforms. And I heard that the deputy mayor is part of the local government association in the country. I would recommend that local government must lobby and advocate for a borrowing regulation that is market-based and cooperative rather than the current one that is centralized. So looking at based on Ivan's presentation, I believe that if they can achieve that task or that goal, that will definitely improve their ability to go out into market and then be able to source in terms of security markets. And thanks, colleagues, for the opportunity. I've really enjoyed the conversation so far. Thanks.
Thank you so much for those insights, James. And it's comparable. You're hearing the differences and the similarities with the Belizean context as well as the South African context. I just want us to move quickly now, actually. Thank you so much, James. We want to move into the interactive Q&A session. Already, I can see that some of you have started posting some direct questions to our esteemed speakers today in the chat. And just to remind you again, if you haven't yet posted your question in the chat, please do so now. You can also indicate who your question is directed to, or if you want to keep it open, that's up to you as well. Alternatively, we'll have a chance you can raise your hand after and I'll call on you. So let's just go through, first of all, with some of the questions already in the chat. So our first question has come from Sikho, who's from Durban, and it's a question directed at you, Irvin. How different is this instrument from a social impact bond? And it wants to look at it from the concept of outcomes-based contracts.
Thanks for the question. In fact, municipal securities can be used to issue social impact bonds now. When you're thinking about social impact, you're looking at other returns to the investors than monetary. There might be a specific social adjustment you want to see. For example, the deputy mayor said he would have been attending a session after this meeting, talking with young men about mental health, mental awareness. You could think about in certain communities where there might be a high level of violence, especially in developing economies, developing markets, high level of violence with young men, imprisonment, that local authority, a municipality might want to issue a social impact bond targeted at addressing certain needs within that community where the outcomes are based on perhaps re-education, retooling, reskilling of young men and investors participating in that. So municipal securities are very broad. The legislation allows for uses beyond just hard infrastructure. And it's just a matter of also creating, this is where certain legislative support might be needed, because the social impact fund, you have measurement issues, etc., that would come with that. But hopefully in time, that would be one of the uses of the municipal securities, where local authorities can actually directly try to impact their communities in different ways rather than just in public infrastructure.
Thank you, Irvin. And I don't know, James, you wanted, or Elude, if you wanted to also comment.
Yeah, if I could just build on that just a bit, I think Irvin highlighted some of the similarities, no, but I think there's a couple of core differences between the two as well, no. Particularly in terms of the repayment terms of the municipal bond structure versus the social impact bond, no. In terms of the municipal bond, repayment is essentially guaranteed, right? It's structured over a fixed term with a set interest payout similar to the usual loan, right? And so given that, then the repayment or the interest is not based on the project success, right? Which is the case for the social impact bond. Repayment is usually conditional. So they would usually measure the impact of those social impact projects that is done through the bond. And then if it is successful, then the interest payments or repayment is made based on the success of that specific project, right, that they executed through the offering. And similarly, in terms of the risks, in terms of the municipal bond, the public sector essentially takes on the risk. I think Irvin did a good job of highlighting that in terms of our investors, it's mostly institutions, right? Financial institutions across the city, across the country. And so in terms of the municipal bond structure, the public sector really bears the repayment risk. Meanwhile, in terms of the social impact bond, the private sector bears performance risk. So I just wanted to highlight that bit of difference in terms of the repayment and the risk in terms of the distinction between the municipal bond and social impact bond.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Very direct, very interesting conversation in terms of the variation of the two. James, would you like to also intervene in this, or are you okay?
No, I'm fine. I think the two gentlemen have covered the question quite well. Thank you.
Fantastically. And I'm going to go straight over to our second question. Thanks a lot, Irvin and Elude, so far on that. We had a question from Timothy Dami. It's a question on national universities. How can a national university strategically leverage international funding mechanisms such as development banks, impact investors, or diaspora bonds to secure long-term growth and sustainability while aligning with national development priorities? And I feel that question may go to you, Irvin. You're also smiling so exclusively. Go
I'm
on.
only smiling because our firm has worked with the University of Belize, which I would say is the national university in terms of looking at their strategic plan and their development goals. So it can be done. We are here speaking about municipalities, but universities, especially in emerging countries, play a critical role in national development, and so their strategic objectives also tend to align with national goals. And within our securities market, the University of Belize, for example, would have been able to borrow and invest based on those strategic goals, using bonds as well as finding multilateral partners for development. That's as far as I would want to go in that, since we don't have a structured legislation for that, and I am not dealt a lot with multilateral funding. Perhaps the mayor, the deputy mayor, or James might be able to add to that multilateral funding space.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a bit to that if possible. No, I think this question is a bit interesting to me. That is my alma mater, the University of Belize. I once served as the president of student government there, and a board member of the university as well. And so UB certainly holds a special place in my heart. But I think that they could really leverage international funding mechanisms, such as development banks, etc., by really aligning their internal initiatives with national development priorities, right? Our national development priorities are clearly outlined in what we refer to as Plan Belize 2.0, which is really the manifesto of the government today, which includes climate resilience, sustainability, education, digital transformation, health and social equity. And so in aligning the initiatives of the university, aligning their programs, research with these development goals or priorities, they will naturally become a partner, right, in the priorities established by the government. Another way is really, I would suggest, I've seen other people do it across the world, is to really develop bankable projects, right? Develop bankable project proposals, such as vocational education, digital labs, green campuses. There's a new trend, right, of these green campuses that really align again with climate adaptation and climate resilience, right? Especially in coastal cities such as Belize City. And so in just taking some of those things into account, I think the university could properly leverage some of the opportunities which exist. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Eliud. James, did you want to come in on that as well?
No, not really here, but I guess for me, it's a very interesting question, and I had to ask myself, in which context would universities want to leverage those funds? Does the university want to act as a financier, or does it want to access financing? And so the question would be the objectives, like the colleague said. What are the strategies and what are the objectives of that municipality? And ultimately, obviously, financiers will always look for projects that generate revenue in order to generate profits. So what kind of projects would be funded by a university, which is more of a social institution? So it would be a bit of a gray area, not unless there are other programs or projects which are more commercial, which a municipality participates in, then ultimately that would be possible. But I am of the view that when one looks at a university's general mandate, it would be very difficult for it to play in the multilateral finances space, the DFI space, or all those financial markets as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, James. So alignment really is key, mainly alignment right through in all of the work that we're doing and trying to ensure that they can have connections of priorities. We have a question here from Anwar Hussain from Pakistan, from LCAP in Pakistan. And this is a question directed to both you, Irvin and James. You told us about the municipal bond issued to get more money to meet the local development plans. Anwar wants to know the legal backing of the municipal bond. You can share.
I can have a first bite, Ivan, if you don't mind. Again, a very interesting question. And I would argue that the first legal backing of a municipal bond is the municipality as a structure itself. So a municipality is a public entity, similar to national governments entities when they issue bonds. One would argue first the legal legitimacy of a municipality is the fact that it's almost sort of like an institution, unlike a private entity which could go under any time. A municipality is more like as long as that country exists, it's a public entity. So therefore, for me, that would be my first observation in terms of trying to respond to the question. That is the first requirement. The second legitimacy aspect is, to what extent is local government decentralized in a country? So there are different ways in which countries it can decentralize, and in most developing countries, decentralization is still in transition. So if the country has a local government sector which has definite powers and functions, and those powers and functions are infrastructure intensive, for example, a municipality requires to build what requires to build a road, for example. A municipality requires to invest in a grid for electricity distribution. That's a specific function that a municipality has. And then you also give the municipality specific revenue instruments. They must be clear. So you know that there are services that are allocated to a municipality. It might have property rates as a source of revenue instrument, or trading services as well. Then essentially what you are saying is that this is an institution that has specific functions, that has specific mandates, that also has revenue instruments that can definitely finance any form of borrowing it wants to explore. So it's not just borrowing from the context of municipal bonds, but any form of debt financing a municipality would want to explore, as long as that is recognized in law. There's a constitution that recognizes those functions. There's legislations that recognize the roles municipalities play. There are policies and regulations and frameworks that guide in terms of how different sectors interact with each other, and also how the municipality interacts with the private sector as well. I would say also what becomes important is the extent to which a country's financial markets are mature. So if a country really doesn't have any strong financial architecture, strong banks, a strong reserve bank, I know that they can be quite controversial, but it's clear that ultimately one would come into that country and invest, and investors understand that ultimately information is available. So as long as information is clearly available and it's clearly understood who are the key role players, that is the legitimacy that would be inform a municipality being able to borrow. So yeah, that would be my input. Thank you.
Thanks, James. And over to Irvin.
Yeah, I think James hit on some very key points, but I'll just focus on the first part, especially with the context of Belize. The legislation is there, but I think some of those key elements that James mentioned is where we would want to see the amendments to the legislation. So providing like Belize City and local authorities with the critical governance powers to borrow on their own, where it's their internal control mechanism, their ability to manage their revenues and expenditures, and the investors' assessment of their credit worthiness that plays a role in whether they can finance these projects. So I think that additional point by James is very critical, giving the local government that authority so that there is not this implicit, and he mentioned the golden rule in South Africa, there is not this implicit view that some institutional investors may have that ultimately the central government, because it has to approve any borrowing, ultimately backstops or guarantees these municipal securities. And I think that's something that is critical, and I'll stop there.
Thanks, Irvin. Transparency is key. Elu, did you want to also come in on that?
No, I think I'll give some input on the other question.
Okay, thanks so much. We have a question as well now from Pakistan again, from Sharush. Can you please share some important amendments that were made within the legal framework to support municipal securities, and how challenges to the same were addressed by Belize?
Well, if I could respond to that, one of the basic changes with the new municipal security was the different sort of instruments that were allowed. So the initial Municipal Paper Act, which Belize City had short-term financing and didn't allow for longer-term instruments. The new municipal securities allowed for all the different types of municipal instruments that you could have as a municipality. The other thing was just the scope of the use of funds. The scope of use of funds in the new Municipal Securities Act was very broad and allowed municipalities to primarily be able to finance any legitimate projects that their community or their residents or their mandate by law would guarantee. So just those are just two that I can see right off the bat. And the third one, which is where we continue to advocate for the removal of approval from the central government, is that the municipalities under their securities operation and their Municipal Securities Act have to respond to the regulator, the Financial Services Commission. So there's an oversight authority now, which provides guidance in terms of what has to be disclosed to investors. And we think that's critical and should allow local authorities to be able to borrow without the need for further approval from the central government.
Thanks for that. Deputy Mayor Elu, you wanted to also add?
I think Irvin covered it well. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I do see a hand popped up. Sandra, if you could just let us know in the chat if it is related to the direct question that we're on, or if not, we'll come to your hand after some of the questions as well. We have a question here for James. What are the processes to legislate municipal borrowings?
Very interesting question again. And I would posit, or rather try to answer the question by saying there are, in principle, according to general rule of thumb or legislation or theory, 4 ways in which you can regulate municipal borrowing. It can be market-based. Market-based meaning that you allow the market to determine the credit worthiness of a institution before you borrow it money. It can also be cooperative, essentially meaning that any form of borrowing that has to take place needs to undertake a rigorous process of consultation and public participation, meaning that you need to get the citizens that will be affected by that borrowing, because remember, they are the ones who have to pay back the loan through the rates they'll be paying. You also need to include critical other stakeholders within your region, but also include government from a context of macroeconomic stability. So one of the risks that are identified with municipal borrowing is that it can also collapse the macroeconomic position of a country. So national government needs to get involved in terms of understanding what the processes are. Are they sound? What kind of projects are you exploring? Are you pursuing? Are they linked to the national agenda as well? Are they linked to the municipal mandate, etc., etc.? Then there's also the centralized regulation, which I think is more of what Belize as a country is experiencing now. The centralized approach in terms of regulation means that before any form of borrowing can be approved for a municipality, national government must approve it. And that is, for me, is the least favorable form of borrowing, because ultimately it essentially means that even when a municipality was to default on or loan, it would not be clear from the creditors who exactly do they go to get their money back, because it needs to be clear that this is a fund that is, this is a debt that is raised by a municipality. Council is responsible for it. Yes, National Treasury might have given them the go ahead, but they are not responsible for a municipality being able to pay it back. And then the last form of regulating borrowing in a country would be rules-based. And I think to a certain extent, we have that. Rules-based meaning that there are rules that are clear that municipalities should follow. For example, the Municipal Finance Management Act is that any form of long-term borrowing must be capital in nature. Any form that is more than a year, a municipality must make sure that it's borrowing for infrastructure investments. And then, of course, there'll be short-term borrowing, which is within a year. But then, of course, a municipality must settle that debt very quickly. So those are the rules that you can design within a system to ensure that ultimately the municipality is able to adhere any form of regulation that you choose. So I think, and then, of course, it has to be in the Constitution, it's recognized in the Constitution. There have to be regulations in place. There has to be an active market, of course. You have to have a private sector that is vibrant, the financial markets that are active and that are very strong. So yeah, I think I will approach that question from that context. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Of course, any other comments in there, Irvin or Elude, feel free.
Yeah, I think James really hit it on the head. One of the things I would have highlighted is the fact that this is a really multi-layered process establishing this infrastructure, and therefore it must be tailored based on the dynamics of various countries' legal system, right? Of their various models and the capital market infrastructure that exists. I think one of the first things in really establishing this is, of course, a constitutional and legal review. It must first, the constitution or subsidiary legislation must first allow for this kind of activity to happen, right? And in the absence of that, then you would need to enact the respective municipal financing law or legal framework for it to happen if it does not currently exist. After that, oversight is, of course, important. And so institutions must be in place that will supervise and regulate this kind of offering. Capital market infrastructure must be present or created. And one of the things, I know Mr. King, our local government director, is on this call. I think one of the most important things, and as Irvin and James would know, is really the need to build institutional capacity. There is a great need to ensure that municipalities engaging in this kind of activity have the in-house capacity, right? In terms of the various positions, as Irvin highlighted earlier. I think the new regulations here in Belize require that we have specific positions filled within the council, including our financial director, right? And this really adds to the confidence of our investors to know that we have the institutional capacity to be responsible with their investment, right? And to ensure that they will see return on their investment. And so those are some of the real steps that are important. And of course, once again, aligning and integrating these activities with the National Development Strategy. And so that's also a very important consideration to make. But I would say that's really the step-by-step way, for starters, as to how you would could go about this process.
Thanks, Elude. And it's the step-by-step processes that really make it clear for some of the cities on this call as well. Differences will be based on your own setups, your own local circumstances. I'm going to go straight into the next question we have. It's around capacity building again, actually on that topic. Is there an international institution that helps in the capacity building of the country institutions on arranging municipal bonds? Are any of you aware of that?
Yeah, if I could just, I know we've been over the years, we've been the beneficiaries of several capacity building offerings, no? Some of them very temporary or, a one-off kind of arrangement. But I know there's several institutions. I think you have the World Bank. Unfortunately for us in Belize, these international organizations tend to deal more at the national level of government. And so sometimes in very rare occurrences, it would trickle down to the local authority, but we have been beneficiaries of offerings by the World Bank in terms of municipal financing framework and capacity building on local bond issuance and such in the past. And I know that the Secretary General of the CLGF is on this call as well. And as you would know, Janine, that we are engaged with UCLG to some level, United Cities and Local Governments. And I know that they have also extended opportunities in the past for trainings, peer exchange, and even policy support, for governments in terms of financial decentralization and such. And so I know there is opportunity out there. However, the challenge for us, and I think it's the same for a lot of Commonwealth municipalities, is really the fact that most of these international organizations kind of engage at the national government level rather than the local level, no? And so it's kind of hard for us to get their support at times. But I know that there is opportunities there.
Yeah, the issue of capacity building always comes up as a critical issue, and that's kind of why even CLGF, we do what we can in this kind of format to try and ensure we use the peer exchange mechanism for developing capacity as far as we can with the local authorities. And the next question actually came from Kiran, asking if CLGF can actually help in capacity building and also if we can facilitate experience sharing visits to municipalities that have gone for any of these. And I would probably say in that is generally the purpose of the CSCN, is to try and support that capacity building as far as we are able to. And we will try as far as we can as well to facilitate exchange and learning in areas where we're able to. In principle, it's something that we are able to do where it's possible. And we tend to have a look directly at municipalities and different modalities depending on what you're looking for. But it's one of those things where you reach out to us as CLGF, and where we see partnerships possible, we will try and explore it. And where we see partnerships possible with other Commonwealth countries who are part of our membership, we also try and explore that aspect. And that's the value, as I said, of the network, using your own expertise within. I know we're running low on time, and I probably I could probably say we have maybe about 5 more minutes, so I'll quickly go through some of the other questions, because I know it's a critical topic and you're blowing up in the chats. So what are the processes of applying for funding, especially for capacity building of businesses? Is the next question. Would any of you have any input to say on that? Yeah, I know in terms of everything is with partnerships, the funding, at least for the terms of with CLGF, we look at things on an individual basis, and we really put forward based on it. There may be project proposals that come against any specific areas of interest. So it's something again to look at individually. Can an international personality apply for a municipal bond? Not sure that is as clear. Let me see where that came from. This is from Rev Desmond. I don't know if Rev Desmond, if you're still on the call, would you like to come on quickly and just provide some clarity on that question? You just have to unmute your mic. Yeah, I'm not seeing him right now, but if feel free to put your hand up and we'll come back to that question as required. Sandra, I want to come across to you as well. You had your hand up for a question. The floor is open. You may ask it.
Yeah, just a quick question. Was it a requirement that the Belize City had corporate status before venturing into the bond market?
No, Belize City does not have a corporate status, but it is in fact, the borrower under the Municipal Securities Act is the city councils or the local authorities as opposed to the city themselves or the local municipalities. That's a difference that I also note here living in the US, where it's the cities as corporations that are borrowing. In Belize's legislation, it's the local authority governments that are borrowing.
Yeah, if I could add there, Erwin, I don't know if this ties into the question directly, but I think one of the first lines in the Belize City Act is really, it speaks to the fact that the council is a body corporate, right? And I know that Mr. King is on this call, and he is always telling us that what that means is that we can sue and be sued, right? And so at the end of the day, regardless of who comes or who serves on the council, administration after administration, the council remains a body corporate. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but that's established in our Belize City Council Act. And Janine, I see there's a very interesting question. The last question posted by Major Jones, that I would like the opportunity to address just before we get off, if time allows.
Sure, Major Jones. I feel like you can go ahead, can the panelists? Well, we have just one question before that. I don't want to just jump across quickly. Could Salga and Belize facilitate the process that they are using for the municipal financing instrument to Zalga, which is another institution? And yes, James has said yes, and Belize has said yes, we're happy. So we'll share as much as possible. I know with Belize, they have even their act that is available, the documentation, the paperwork behind it. Those are documents we can also share with the participants to make sure that you can have a stronger sense and reach out to them as well for more information on how they operate. And straight yes to that question from Major Jones. Can the panelists share some thoughts on the political risks to the markets, the municipal bond markets? Go ahead, Lude.
Yeah, I think really the success of these kind of instruments depends not just on the legal framework, which we've focused a lot on during this presentation today, but it really has a lot to do with political stability, right? And credibility, and as Irving is always saying, confidence, right? And so confidence has a lot to do with the administration of the day. And so Irvin also highlighted it earlier, is that change in government or municipal leadership also plays a very important role in the entire scheme of things. And so the discontinuity of certain policies or financial commitment after election is always a risk, I would assume, to our bondholders, right? Especially where we offer instruments between 5 and 10 years, right? While the political terms, as Irvin shared earlier, is much shorter at just 3 years. As well, over the years, what we've realized is really important is really the communication. And I think that is one of our strengths here at the Belize City Council, is the way we communicate with our bondholders, but also the way we communicate how we use the funds invested into the city, right? As Irvin would know, we have some serious campaigns in terms of communication campaigns when we are investing in our infrastructure and other investments as well, because municipal borrowing could easily be framed as increasing public debt, as you know, right? And risking taxpayers' funds and all of that. And so if it is that political opponents really want to utilize this as a way of, speaking against the government of the day, they could. And so for that reason, it is a political risk, but again, communication remains extremely important on that front. And I think we've really done a good job of strengthening the way we communicate with our residents, but also the way we communicate with our bondholders at the end of the day. So that's just my response there.
Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
I could also just have a bite at it. I see that the time is not on our side. And again, the question is quite broad, and it could be double-edged for me. The political risk of municipal bonds. The political risk would be that if the market does not have any confidence in the institution, the interest rates are going to be higher. Secondly, if the sector is rife with corruption and instability, we are struggling with coalitions now as a country. The term of the bonds are going to be shorter. So ideally, really, the term of a bond should be in line with the term of the infrastructure you invest in. So if you are unable to have an environment which is politically stable, that definitely results in those kinds of risks. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And it's the same that goes across the board. We are low on time now, and I really want to say thank you so much for all the questions and comments that have been coming in on the chat. We've gone through quite a few of them, and there are some comments. Everything that is there, we will take on board and, of course, reflect on, and anything that we have to get back to you on, we definitely will. And I know that our colleagues here are willing to work with the CSCN, with the network, to be able to develop the different experiences and to explore all these things further as far as possible. So I want to really thank you all for that opportunity. So as we wrap up here, just a few takeaways, lots of themes that are cross-cutting for Commonwealth cities across the board, right? Belize has been very, very useful in demonstrating that smaller cities actually are able to tap into innovative financing, given mainly the right legislative framework and, of course, the correct institutional support to be able to ensure that happens. And, of course, the political will and the political approach has to be on point as well and aligned. The legal frameworks really matter. Cities really need to find ways to establish legislation in order to pursue things like market-based financing. And that's what this is really about. You have to put your ducks in a row. It's really important to have local revenue in terms of a strong local tax base. And also, you spoke a lot about the transparency and ensuring that you build that investor confidence. It's very critical in actually moving forward with anything along these lines. Partnerships, of course, partnerships are very important. We didn't speak too much about it today, but I think in general, they are the kinds of things that enhance impact. A lot of you are asking about partnerships with the CSCN, with CLGF, and we are here partnering with Stalga and with the Belize City Corporation and with Legacy. And partnerships, really, you can partner with the associations, local government associations, private sectors, and donors as well. And that can really improve your ability to be technically ready for advancing in this area. Capacity building, a lot of speech on that. It's important, and it's probably equally as important as the capital itself. The institutional readiness is really something that you would see as a precondition for accessing any finance. So there's need for training, continuity, and even the strategic planning. You need these things to be all essential in building it in. And of course, every context is unique, but that said, the principles still remain the same and they travel well across the Commonwealth. Even in the small cities, with the right conditions, municipal securities and things that are pooled financing options, they can be really viable tools for development finance. So really, everyone, this session, it actually directly supports some of the efforts that we are taking at CLGF and through the CSCN to bring local government perspectives into an upcoming conference, the UN's Financing for Development conference that's taking place this June in Seville, Spain. And that conference presents a critical opportunity to reform global financing systems, strengthening investment at all levels, included some of the much needed changes to the international financial architecture to help advance the SDGs. Since the reality is that process for financing for development, their processes really typically focus on national priorities. So a lot of talk today was about ensuring alignment with national priorities, ensuring alignment with the priorities throughout your working documents. It's really essential that the local voices are heard in these kinds of conferences and in these settings. And we really want to encourage you to share your own city's needs, your own city's priorities and innovations with your national delegations ahead of that Financing for Development conference. Just really to make sure that we ensure that their local governments meaningfully represented in those conversations. So I really want to encourage everyone, let's keep the entire conversation going. This was really fantastic. We invite you to, of course, share all your takeaways, any innovations as well that you have. Share them with us. You can share it with me directly. You can share them on social media and really use the opportunity to showcase what your particular city may be doing in finance, in governance, or in sustainability. And we really want to find a way to ensure that local governments across the Commonwealth keep the topic about subnational financing a buzz. Yeah. And lastly, I really want to thank you, a very big thank you, really, first of all, to the Belize City Council for kicking off this series with such a very strong session, and to our speakers for your very thoughtful, very inspiring, very detailed inputs, and for also the engagement with the audience. Thank you so much, audience, for participating so well. We, of course, will follow up with a recording of today's webinar. You'll also receive a short summary note. And of course, this is a series. We are hoping to do more member-led sessions from different cities. So if you think that your city would like to showcase some of your own innovations by hosting a member-led webinar like this, reach out to me. I am open to hear from you, and we'll be very happy to work with you to make that a reality. So thanks again for being with us, everyone. Until next time, take care and let's stay connected. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.